So have you ever been in a situation where you felt like no matter how hard you worked, you never got ahead? Like paycheck to paycheck? No?
Yes.
I'm the only one?
No, for sure. No. Especially starting out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, for me, I can remember, I was just reminded of a story. When I was at Liberty University in college, I did not have a whole lot of money. I remember the day my dad dropped me off. He gave me $123, which was all that he had in his pocket. And that was all the help I got from my family. And I love my parents, raised me well. And I had to work. So I looked for a job. I got hired at the airport, and I won't go into the whole story about how I got that job. It was pretty awesome. And I worked 60 to 80 hours a week plus full-time school. And I look back, I'm like, man, how did I even do that?
Yeah.
And I remember all my money went to school to get me through. And I had loans, and I wasn't making, I don't know, it had to be like $4 an hour, you know? And it might have been a little bit more than that. It wasn't much.
Those high-paying college jobs.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, right?
We're so grateful too.
And I remember this one time, I mean, I had no money. And my girlfriend at the time, which is my wife, you know, she used to bring me food. And I remember this one time, I had no money. I was down. It was one of those days where you're just like, I'm a pretty high emotional guy, but there's a few days a year where I'm just emotionally a mess.
Yeah.
And I'm just miserable. Don't get around me those days because you'll get depressed. And it was one of those days, and I was in the hangar, and I was hungry. I hadn't eaten a meal or two that day, and I was praying, and I was at the time of my life where I was memorizing a lot of scripture, and I'll never forget walking in the hangar, and I used to park planes. I was not on the commercial side. I was on the independent side. And lots of little planes and fun pilots that would come in that would do cool stuff. And I'm in there, and I'm like running my hand on the wings. I'll never forget. I'm like saying verses, and I'm praying, and I'm like, God, I'm just hungry. I get emotional thinking about it. And yeah, I don't know where that came from. And I'm just praying in there, and you know, and then I get on the radio, hey, such and such flight's coming in, get ready. And there's a plane coming in. You never know who they are. You don't know what they're going to do. And they're like, hey, they need such a fuel. You know, go get the fuel truck. And this is like Lynchburg, Virginia. This is not like industrial airport, right? So like you go get like the tanker, which is like a tractor, like the big tractor wheels that you're pulling the gas, you know? So I get all that ready. They come in, and you know, when you pull up to a gate, these aren't gates. Like they pull up to the airport,
right? And
the door opens. You know, and they walk out.
Drop down.
Yeah. So, and some planes are nice and some aren't. Most of these planes that come in, they're either kit planes, Cessnas, or every now and then you get a nice, cool little jet that'll, you know, have 20 people on it. And this was one of those. You don't know who's getting on or who's like, are they really wealthy people? A bunch of punk kids on a basketball team, you know, because we're in a college town. And I didn't even see who they were. I was on the other side of the plane, starting to hook up and fuel, and I got them in. And then, you know, I'm putting all the gas away, and I get a thing on my radio saying, hey, come into the break room. He's like, they left some stuff. He's like, they were going to throw it away. So he's like, it's all yours if you want it. And I go in there, and it was this plane that had come in from wherever, and they had all amazing food, and they didn't touch any of it. I'm talking like filet, lobster, shrimp,
jeez,
like all the fixings you can imagine, and it's just sitting there. And I walk in, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, like,
the God of abundance.
Oh man, it was
exactly.
so good.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if it was a
bars.
combination. You know, sometimes you get really hungry, no matter what it is. You can eat leather, and you're like, oh, this is the best leather I've ever ate. You know, and there's other times where you're like, this is like legit good food, and it wouldn't matter. And that was one of those times. Like it was legit, and I hadn't eaten a meal or two because I was poor. Yeah. You know, all my money went to school. You know, and I'm thankful. Like I don't look back at that and regret any of it. And I want my kids to have the same experience. God's blessed us. We can write a check for our school, and I'm not doing it because I want them to have the same experience that I had. It won't be as bad. I'm gonna give them a little bit more than $123.
Yeah.
You know, but the experience that I had in that stage of my life where I had no freedom of income, I had no freedom of time, I had no freedom of choice, and purpose, forget about it. I didn't even bring up purpose. Yeah. So actually, I will take that back. I went to school with a purpose. I went to school to become a youth pastor.
Right.
Worked out great.
So much for that.
But my purpose was I believed God was going to do something in my life. So I would say I had direction on purpose. Although I'm not sure I had the freedom of purpose.
Yeah, that's right.
But I had no freedom of income. And some people might not have had experiences that were that bad. That was bad. That was awesome. Like, I love telling that story. I forgot all about it,
Yeah. It was a cool story.
Yeah, and there's been times even getting into this career, eons ago, decades ago, literally, where, my first couple of years, I barely made any money. If it wasn't for my wife having a really good job at CompuServe, I'm not sure we actually lived with my in-laws, Janet sitting over here, for the first year of our marriage. Because we weren't sure we could afford an apartment. We lived in her childhood bedroom for 1 year when we first got married. So the freedom of income is very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I grew up very poor. We had a great childhood, but we just didn't have a lot of money. So when you hear poor, I don't want you to think desolate or bad life. I just want no money.
Yeah. No,
But the realities are, a lot of people, even there's a survey conducted by the Lending Club, 61% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
That's funny. I would have thought it'd be much higher than that.
Yeah.
That's
I would've
2023.
You can think of somebody with a lot of money. They got a $2 million house, and you look at them, nice cars.
Yeah.
But if they lose their job, the house is on the line.
Right.
You've got to have a pretty nice paycheck to.
Well, we talked about
Continue
that
with it.
lifestyle creep,
Yeah.
right? Where
It's huge.
you can. When I think of like being poor, having no money, I think of literally like there's none. Like, I got 23 cents in my bank. But there's a lot of poor people that have a lot of money, that have really good jobs.
Lots of levels of poverty.
Yeah, lots of
Yeah.
levels of poverty
Lots of
because
levels of poverty.
they start at an apartment, or they start in their parents' house,
Yeah.
and then they go to an apartment, and then they go to a house, then they go to a bigger house, then they go to a bigger house, and then they get a car, a 2-car, a 3-car, whatever. And now all of a sudden they're like, hey, I'm making 10 times what I did when I first started, but I have still 23 cents left in my bank account at the end of a month.
Because I'm literally spending every penny that comes in.
It's funny, when I was in graduate school, I was making $400 a month, washing dishes or whatever. And I had money going into the bank at that level, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got my little condo. I'm pocketing money and everything.
Yeah.
But then you get out of school, you get married, you get a job. Oh, I'm making 10 times what I was making, but then
I'm not saving
so
any.
much
I've also
less.
bought a house. And,
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
expenses kind of
Well,
keep
you
up
got
with what you got.
kids. Yeah. I mean, it all stacks up.
I know. So when it comes to this, why do you think so many people get stuck in that rut? Like, where they're like, hey, I made a little, but I was able to save some, or now I make a lot and I can't save any. Why 61% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck? Is it because they literally can't make more? Like, what's the deal?
I think a lot of it is this relationship with money and this lifestyle creep and keeping up with the Joneses. I hate to say that, but keeping up with the Joneses, you're keeping up with the Joneses who are trying to keep up with the other Joneses. And a lot of times there's not a whole lot behind that. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you're making, but I think it's relationship with money. And I also think there's people who grew up a certain way, and that'll cause them to never fall into that again or never get out of that, right? And there's people who grow up with a ton, and then they've got this forever like inflated confidence, and they live above their means. And then you've got these some other folks who have the forever fear because they grew up potentially in poverty, and they'll grow into making more money, but they always live on the fear. So they always live on that lower level. So they actually may have more money than the person who's making more money.
I think it's corporate advertising. They tell us this is what you want to do. This is what you want to put your money into.
And you got to keep up. Yeah,
And you
right.
gotta keep up
That's
with
the
it.
other thing. You got to keep up with it.
I totally agree with that. I want to touch on what you were saying, Nikki,
Yeah.
about, I would call it scarcity. This came up in discussion yesterday. I was in an all-day business owner meeting and for C12, and one of the guys that was talking at one point, and there's very successful business owners in this room. I would imagine that every single one is worth many millions of dollars. And one of the guys, he just was very transparent at that moment. He's just like, I operate my business out of scarcity. He's like, I'm always afraid. He's like, I've nearly gone bankrupt twice. And he's like, I'm so afraid that I'm going to make a decision that's going to bankrupt this company. And they got their balance sheets look awesome, tons of cash. And he's like, but there's not a day that goes by where I'm not worried that there's not going to be money in the bank, even though there's millions in the bank, and I think that's a mindset change.
Yep.
When we're talking about, why do so many people live paycheck to paycheck? Because the mindset isn't scarcity. Not that scarcity is good, because I don't want you to live in fear. But I think there has to be, and I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, some kind of thought process that breaks you out of it. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about what the freedom of income actually means. So as we develop these 4 freedoms, we don't have any psychologists in this office. We're a bunch of financial advisors who've transitioned from career to career, settled here, or just like me, I just started in this business. And I've seen a lot of things over the years. I've met with thousands of people, tens of thousands probably over the years. And the first 10 years of my business, I probably met 5 to 6 people a day, 5 days a week. Some days meeting as many as 9 in a day. I mean, we were like a factory, and you learn a lot talking to a lot of people. And I boiled down, so many different things that I've read in books and I've talked in meetings to these 4 freedoms. And we're specifically going to talk about this freedom of income today. And one thing I've learned over the years is that the freedom of income doesn't have a whole lot to do with lifestyle. So a lot of people will go, well, the only way you can have freedom of income is if you make above X. That is not it at all. I know people that have the freedom of income that live on like $50,000 a year. I know people that have no freedom of income that live on $250,000 a year. So the amount of money that you make doesn't determine the level of freedom that you have in income. What does is your lifestyle. So like that $50,000 couple, they actually might be okay. Let's just say they have no debt. Their kids are gone. They can enjoy their life on, $3,000 a month. And that extra $1,000 is the plus, is the buffer, the travel, the emergency.
The
They've got enough money sitting in the bank that if their furnace leaks or the roof leaks or the furnace, the furnace can leak too, breaks or whatever, they've got an emergency. That means the true emergencies can't happen because they can cover it. There's buffer in their monthly paycheck on their budget, and they're very comfortable. So there are a lot of people probably watching this going, how in the world could you do that? I asked the same question. I have no idea how people can be super happy spending such, because I see what it costs to live and go to the grocery store. Like we went to Reed's Market in South Park last weekend, and we got 1 bag of groceries. 1 bag. And it had some like frozen meals in it. It had some crackers. I forget whatever. It was $200.
Good grief.
It's crazy.
It was 1 bag. We're walking out. I was with my son and his girlfriend, my middle son, and they went to the car and we were checking out. We did get some sandwiches. We got 3 sandwiches to eat for lunch, and then 1 bag of groceries was $198.
And a pound of bacon.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
exactly.
that shot you over the top.
And I got in the car and I literally said to my son, I said, how much do you think this bag was? Because I was so in shock. We almost said, cancel the order.
Right.
And he goes, literally, he was like, $150. And I was like, I've totally ruined my kids. My first response, like, how could you think a 1 bag? I would have probably answered $50.
Right.
$200. So the lifestyle, going back to that point, people can find total freedom of income, understanding what their basic needs are, plus a little bit more. It's not an extravagant thing. It's very personal. That's why there's no levels. I can't say, well, you have to have this much more, this much of income plus. It really depends on who you are and what makes you happy. There are people that can have freedom of income at 50, 100, 150. There's certain people that probably need 800, a million. That's a whole different discussion. But the realities are basic needs plus a little bit more. And that plus is probably 25%. So if your lifestyle is $8,000 and that's your basic needs because you bought the bigger house and you got a couple cars and whatever it is, then your freedom of income probably would be at that $125,000-ish mark. If it's 200, it's going to be 250. If it's 50, it's going to be 60 something. So the reality is, the rich isn't rich.
Yeah, we were even talking about, one of your mission trips to Kenya and what they live on there, yet they're as happy as they can be. And we know a multitude of stories around, you go to different countries and around different people, and rich is not a number.
No.
In your bank account.
No.
Like it is totally a mindset.
The one thing from my mom grew up, no shoes, no running water. They had an outhouse. My mom brushed her teeth with baking soda in her finger. And
really?
Oh yeah. So my mom always taught you, and it's literally, I think my brother, sorry, Aaron, if you're watching, a third for what you want, a third for what you need, and a third for what you want and need in the future. And my mom's had that little chart in our wallet, right? Forever. I actually think Aaron still has it because he's the better kid. But we both lived by it, right? It's always been big. But to somebody like my mother, she almost gets mad at my dad when he tries to treat her with some jewelry. Yeah, she'll get mad at my dad when he goes too lavish. Because to my mom, having money in the bank, they invest their money, but having money is like a fine dining meal for her. Like she would rather eat a tomato sandwich at home or her Elvis Presley sandwich with her peanut butter and her bananas. She enjoys that knowing that she's going to be okay because she's got that third for the future. That is like her vacation in some respects because it makes her happy and content and feel free because for her, she didn't have that. Her dad worked on the farm up until the day he literally died. So from my mom's perspective, a third in the bank means I'm okay. I'd rather have that than some fine meal. That brings her more freedom and comfort and happiness. So I think it's all perspective.
It is very much all perspective. You brought up a thought. When I was growing up, I already said I didn't have a whole lot of money and then went into college. I didn't start buying drinks at restaurants until after I was married. Because the drink is the most expensive thing, right?
It really is.
So I was like, I'm not going to waste my money. I will drink water every meal because I can save $1, $2 every meal.
$3.75 now, which is crazy.
But back then it was like, I'm like, that's $1.50. Like I'm not spending $1.50 on a Coke.
Right.
No offense, Coke. It was just super expensive. I didn't want to do that, and it allotted me saving for other things because I couldn't eat out that much. So when I did, I was like, I got like $10, and I want an extra cheeseburger, or am I going to get a drink?
$10 of food.
That's right. Yeah. And that was my methodology. Like if I could afford to go out to eat, that's what I was going to do. I'll suffer through a glass of water.
Makes me think of high school and college. I used to beat up that dollar menu.
Those are good, man. I don't know what happened, but they were good when I was young. Now I'm like, no.
Yeah. And they were good, even better that they were $1. Like they just tasted better because they were $1.
Another thing that I want to bring up before we start talking about how to break the cycle is the motivation behind making money. I lived it, but didn't understand it before I hired it and understood it. So when I was working in this business and I got hired in at a small firm up in Michigan, I had success right out of the gate. Yeah, way more. I quadrupled the amount of money that I made at that company that I did at Morgan Stanley. And my first year. And I was like, this is crazy. But then I kind of hit this like plateau. And my boss was like, why aren't you growing? And what happened was my motivation changed. I wanted to hit this level of income that would hit my needs. Mm-hmm. And I was able to do that very quickly. There was motivation. It was exciting. It was fun. But there's a lot of other things involved in the story that I don't want to get into. But my motivation was directly tied to my lifestyle. The lifestyle, my basic need.
Yeah.
Okay, not the enjoying lifestyle, my basic need lifestyle, which I wanted to get out of where we were. I wanted to get into a home. We were in an apartment. We didn't love our neighbors. And, there was about a bunch of motivation. My last boss at Morgan Stanley, he was like, you want to do better at your job? He's like, go buy a BMW. Go get a sports car. Get a boat.
You got to add image.
Well,
toys.
No. you need motivation.
To go and make more.
He's like, go get
He wanted you to be in debt. So
Well, that's
you
the
had
way
to work
some companies
your tail off.
operate, though. They want their employees to have all these things so that they need the company.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's
They need the motivation to go
the
work
golden
harder to go get more
handcuffs,
clients.
yeah.
And I was like, no way. I went home and I talked to my wife. I was like, he wants me to get a BMW. Like, I ain't buying no BMW. Like, what? I was so irritated. That actually was the beginning of the end of me working there. And then I went to the other office and the same thing. And then when I started my own, I realized that people fight for what they need. And the money. They will say, I need this, and they will fight very hard. Once they hit that need, that motivation to get those raises and to fight for bonuses, it dies off very quickly. Mm-hmm. Not that we don't all want to get ahead, but our motivation to earn money drastically changes once you hit that need.
Well, I think as we're talking about these freedoms, when you're trying to get, especially in our space where it's basically when you help people, that's how you get paid. And if you don't have any clients, you're not getting paid. So you've got to build up to where your needs are. So you kind of give up the freedom of time, these other freedoms, and you're going to sacrifice, and you may work longer hours. You may take a meeting at night or early in the morning or whenever,
To earn that freedom.
to earn the freedom of income. But you've had to sacrifice these others. So then whenever you get to that need space and you're like, okay, I can at least take a breath. Like, I know we can pay our mortgage. Kids can eat.
Right.
We're not having to like cut out everything. Then you start wanting to fight back for that freedom of time and freedom of choice, and the other priorities kind of start coming back in line.
That's a great transition to, let's break this cycle. Let's talk about, the 61% versus the 39%. The 39% of Americans that don't live paycheck to paycheck were able to get out of this, motivation issue. This, hey, I'm going to be motivated to work as hard as I need to. What's that one quote? People work hard enough to not get fired and make just enough to not quit. I forget who said that.
Okay.
But it's so true. And that's why 61% of Americans are in this rut of living paycheck to paycheck, because they don't want to work that hard, but they've got enough to live. They don't have to go find another job. And they just, every time the money comes in, it just goes right back out and there's no extra.
Yep.
How do we break the cycle of the 61%?
Well, I do have to chime in on something before we leave the motivation. If there's one thing that concerns me slightly, okay, I am so happy that people are doing well and they have enough to just spoil the heck out of their kids. But when you talk about motivation and put me in that spot, I don't mean to. I try to teach the lessons that my parents did to my kids. But in the society we're in, and then certain pockets of the world, right, that we are spoiling our kids. They don't have that level of motivation because they've never had, they get everything, they have everything they want, everything they need, and they really haven't had to rely on a plane backing in and saying, hey, here's your next meal, right? So that motivation, when you come from a pretty wealthy family or you're getting everything you need, the motivation, and I worry a little bit about the society. I have an opportunity to take on some of my clients' kids, and it's been a big learning for me. Their motivation is different than what we've been talking about up until now. Like, they don't have to do it. So trying to motivate them, their parents are asking me to talk to them, to try to motivate them because they're having a hard time teaching them. I'm like, well, stop giving them so much. And then I look in the mirror and I say, as I'm driving home, my kids are probably having a hard time too. No wonder they don't want that second job like we might have, wanted to do. But anyway, I think motivation, self-inflicted also, and I think today in our society, we've got to be careful.
Well, no, it's life experiences,
Oh.
Parents grow up with World War II, or it was a much more difficult time.
Right.
Going from the tractors and farming to where we are today.
Outhouses.
Outhouses. Yeah.
It's
Don't go
not
making
the same
fun of my
world
mom.
that our kids
I'm
are
taking
growing
her to
up.
Steak 48 is what
You
I'm
better
doing.
take her to Steak 48. She might get mad at you.
She'll cry.
You should have given her that money to invest. Yeah. But no, you are right. And I also think, and I'll just say this, when you have people who grew up with nothing and they didn't have a whole lot, some of the spoiling your kids comes from a good place. Like, I don't want them to feel the way I felt. I want them to know that I've worked hard to be able to provide for them, and I don't want to just provide for them. I want to give them more than what I had. Like, it doesn't always come from a bad place. But it's a different place, and it's that perspective
That's
that
thing
stems
is
the motivation.
It's gone generation to generation. We
Yes.
always want it better for our kids
Yes.
than we had it. That's what
And-
my parents wanted,
Yeah.
better for us. And pretty soon, I think we make very soft people, because they
Yes.
haven't had
That's a nice way of saying
That is a really good one-liner for what I was trying to
soft
say.
people.
10 sentences.
You mean we're gaining
soft
weight?
people.
And we
well,
got a little,
that might be my problem.
Oh. Sorry, I just had to say that because I do think
that's a whole nother podcast.
it is a whole nother podcast, but it's a thing. That
Let you
motivation.
and Paul handle that.
Yeah. Oh boy. All right.
So
back to
let's
the
talk
breaking the
about
cycle.
breaking the cycle. There's two key concepts that I want to talk about personally. There's probably a million ways to break the cycle. And this podcast, this discussion isn't to, give you the 6 steps to breaking, the paycheck to paycheck or to find the freedom of income. There's so many different ways that you can break the free, or you can earn the freedom of income. But I would say these are key concepts that probably almost have to happen every single time that somebody's going to break. The first is how you think about money, and the second is how you manage your time. So the first one we're going to talk about is how you think about money. I think when people look at money as a form of worth, it almost gets them behind the 8 ball out of the gate. Like, I want this stuff.
Well, that's the stuff aspect of it
Yeah.
that came to my mind.
Well,
He
that's
who
worth.
dies with the most toys wins.
Wins, yeah.
Yeah, but how horrible.
Well, there's no
like a
motivation
scarcity
behind it. I think the
mindset.
problem is that it's the way you think about money. Like, money isn't a tool; it's a destination. It's a ring you wear. It's a badge you have, and I just want that money. Well, that mindset is not going to help anybody earn money. The motivation isn't good enough for the vast majority of society to be like, hey, I'm going to work so I can get a Ferrari. I'm going to work because I want a mansion. Like, maybe there are a few people out there that can truly motivate them, but the vast majority want to live on purpose. They want to live and work to something towards that's bigger than themselves.
Right.
It's the basic need, and then beyond that basic need, the motivation has to be bigger than you. And that's what and it can't, and I shouldn't say it can't. For the vast majority, the dollar bill or the Benjamin or whatever bill you want to talk about is not a motivator to become wealthy or financially free. It's typically always something else. And what I've seen in my career, and from all the thousands of clients that I've met with over the years, that they look at money as a tool. They're like, I don't work to become wealthy. I work because I love my job, or I work because I serve people, or I love what I do. Like, I'll never forget the very first $1 million client I sat in front of. He was a garbage man. Never made more than like 40 grand a year. And they lived a very frugal lifestyle. Him and his wife, they were foreign, and they were so sweet. And he's like, I just take out the trash. He's like, I got, and he was a nice religious guy. He's like, God's blessed our family. He's like, I can't believe that we've got $1 million. And he's like, and that came from taking the trash out. And he's like, I've literally like the guys that take your trash out. A millionaire, taking trash out, and in Michigan. And his mindset about money, he's like, we don't need money for happiness. He's like, money has never done anything for us other than allowed us to buy things. He's like, money means nothing to me. And he goes, I love the fact that we have $1 million in the bank, but he goes, it won't make us happier in retirement. And then I think he looked at her. I don't remember what he said. He's like, but we got everything we need right here. It was like the coolest.
Oh, geez.
I know. It was super
Yeah,
cool.
that's
Like, it was one of those meetings where you're like, these people got something figured out. And it was the beginning of a mindset shift change to me, because I'm like, I think rich people think different than non-rich people. And rich, we can define however you want to define there. Mm-hmm. But I started to learn very young in my career that wealthy people look at money as a tool. Their mindset is, money's not going to use me. I'm going to use money. And that mindset, I think, already breaks the shackles of I'm just going to work for my basic needs, and when I get there, my motivation shuts off, and I'm going to be done. These people already go, hey, money is just an aspect of what I'm getting paid. My real motivation is to do a really good job. And when people serve well and they give 100%, who's the How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Carnegie?
Carnegie.
Yeah.
He said the vast majority of Americans give 25% of themselves and impress nobody. 50% impress almost everybody, but there's special people out there that give 100% of what they have to offer, and everybody wants to be around them. Every company wants to hire them. Everybody wants to be mentored by them. And he's like, and every single one of us has the capacity to give 100% of who we are. And those are the people that make all the money.
Yep.
And that was basically the summarization of his book, How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Others, yeah.
And it basically came down to how much of yourself are you pouring into what you do?
Dude, that comes back to what we talked about earlier. Purpose. Purpose brings you there. You don't make money, you're idle. You work, and things you do is according to your purpose.
Because if you get the mansion, you want the mansion, the yacht, and then a mansion on the beach. One in here. It's never enough if you're just going after the first
That's what
part
Miss
of
Piggy said. More is not enough.
More is not enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
Really?
I didn't know
I
about
didn't know
Miss
that.
Piggy.
The wealth of
I
knowledge
was
over
going
here.
to say, CP and his one-liners that sums
How
up
you
like,
can pull a Miss Piggy quote out of
Yeah.
the thin
I thought it was
air.
appropriate.
yeah, totally.
That's so funny. I never raised a daughter, so that Miss Piggy never entered our household. All right, the other one is the importance of time management. How does managing your time allow you to break the cycle of going paycheck to paycheck, and how can managing your time give you or help you work towards the freedom of income?
Where were you going with that?
Yeah, how we have to decide. That's
Are you talking about a work-life balance in terms of time management, or?
I think there are certain people out there that work so hard, but they're not using their time effectively. And I can tell you for me, when I started this business, I wore every hat. I took the trash out. I painted the walls. I did everything. Not to mention my job, but I did all the things that weren't a part of my job. And then I started to realize that I had certain strengths and certain weaknesses. And I started working towards my strengths, and I started hiring or giving away some of my weaknesses. And I would focus less on my weaknesses. The time management is kind of that thought process. What has God really gifted me at, and what should I really be doing versus working through the other stuff? Some of that is the jobs you select. It's how you're spending your time. Hey, I got this job. I make enough to cover my needs, but it's not who I am, and I'm not pouring myself into it. It's taking the necessary time to understand who you are, how you're made, and then using your time and the purpose of who you're made, who's your skills,
Yeah.
and using that in a way that can kind of break the cycle. So
not only provide for your family, but also bring you to your purpose, right? A little bit.
correct. It's using time
more.
efficiently.
Right.
It's not, hey, I'm work this dead end job that I hate. You're wasting your time there.
Well, and it's going to bleed over into everything else
Yes,
too.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you'll waste even like the moment you get at home, you'll be miserable.
Yeah. And there's a lot of business technique in here. I'm trying not to make it just business. I'm very efficient with my time, and I don't like to waste any of it. And I feel like the better I can manage my time, the better my entire life is. Like, I can spend more time with my family, more time in ministry, more time at work, more time organizing my time to make sure I don't waste any of my time. And by doing all that, the business grows, like life is more fulfilled, like everything changes. Yes, that is some of the things that I'm talking about. But if you don't own a business and you
what if
can't
you
organize
just work at the bank.
Yeah,
and you're a
thing is,
W-2, like
a lot of people think busyness means you're accomplishing something.
that's not.
yeah,
That's not right.
It's not the hours you work; it's the impact you make.
And that's more of where I'm headed with
Right.
time. It's
Right.
how are you spending your time is what I want to get at here. Do you agree, disagree?
No, it's perfect. I just know that we've got a time one coming up, and a couple of my topics could go to a whole presentation. But no, I do. I think it's finding your true north, figuring out what you're good at. Forget worrying about your weaknesses. Surround yourself with people who can pick up that slack for you so that you can stay focused. And we did that working genius. That was brilliant. That's that concept of working genius, and you getting to where you're doing what you're really good at, but also gives you the energy to keep doing what you're good at and help others on your team, in your life, get to the places that are their working genius, that bring out their best, that get them to be the most productive. But it's easier said than done. And the only quick thing on, as a business owner, you have to get to a point. Again, it's all these 4 freedoms. You have to get to the point where you have enough money to then pay the people. To your point, you're painting the walls and you're cleaning the toilets. You don't have enough money to pay those people to do that yet, right? You're relying on the plane to back up and give you the food. But you have to get to, it's the balance of all the different freedoms to ultimately get to, I don't know, the destination, if you will. But no, you got to use your time. I think it's even more
Which we
important than
said
money.
in the last show, like, they all bleed over.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
as soon as you say
and
one.
I personally believe that you have to think about money the right way, in the right vein, and you have to organize your time very, very well to have the freedom of income and be able to control your time. Like, they're so interconnected, you know, because if you don't spend your time working in the right job, you're never going to find the freedom of income. So that has everything to do with time. It's
Forget purpose.
any
Yeah.
job is not just going to get it done.
Right.
It has to, you have to be the right person, the right job, at the right company to thrive. And if you're wasting your time somewhere else, you're going to be the 61%. I mean, that's just the way I see it.
Yeah.
So if you're the W-2, the bank worker, the teller, the whatever, that's how I'm thinking about it. You're wasting your time at the wrong job.
Right. Or you may eventually get to that freedom of income when you retire because you're like, I just saved some money, but I went paycheck to paycheck. But you wasted 40 years of just like, man, it could have been so much more during that. So,
is there any other nuggets you want to, talk about at the end here? Because I know we're about to talk about the freedom of time.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of mine would go on to a longer.
Any other piggy jokes?
Not Miss Piggy, but a lot of times people will say, I want to be a millionaire, or I want this, or I want that. That they find some sort of happiness, and this is my destination. And I always say, no, you spend this much time. How about enjoying the journey? It's not about the destination. Yeah, that might be where you want to go, but don't make it a miserable life getting there.
well, I think we touched on it. That shift in your mind of seeing money as a tool and like you're just being a steward of it, and you get blessed with your income, and then it's this passing on of it, you're transferring it to someone else. Just being wise with those decisions and understanding that it's not about hoarding it and collecting it. You've got to have that freedom.
Told me
around
that the more stuff you have, the more stuff you got to take care of. So
Yeah.
there's a burden to having a whole lot of stuff.
It's so personal. That's always my takeaway is, to your point, the more people you listen to, in your meetings and your days, the more you learn, and you just gather so much wisdom, right? On profound concepts on money. And it's really, everybody's got a different relationship, and how do you quickly learn who you are, what's important to you, and then balance that with providing for that need and that want and getting in the right job. Like, it's a balance. To me, it's personal and it's a balance. That would be my thoughts, I think.
Well, this has been good discussion. Next up, we're going to be talking about the freedom of time, which we'll probably end up talking about the freedom of money as well. The freedom of
Say,
Kind
the
of interrelated,
freedom of
aren't they?
choice.
Yeah.
They're so tightly woven. So this is fun. So next up, we're going to talk about. And last thing I want to mention, at the end of this series, we're going to be giving away the Freedom Assessment tool, which I'm super excited to launch. We've been working on it for months, and you're going to be able to do that. So stay tuned.